Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dota Underlords podcast episode. God knows what at this point. It's supposed to be every single Friday, except for last Friday, and the Friday before that, Swim wasn't even on, except for his face, which was beautiful. And now we have Zeno with a terrible webcam. My name is Sunsfin, joined as always by Zeno, and sometimes Swim, and this time Panda. How's it going, everybody?
It's going great.
It's good.
Good. Panda,
Very hot.
tell us who the hell you are. I don't know who you are at all. Please.
Well,
Intro.
for those that played Artifact, I casted that for a bit, but majorly I'm from Gwent, like Swim. We were born in Gwent, and I'm still hanging on, and casting mostly is my thing. I've also played kind of competitively, but mostly casting.
Cool.
Don't be modest, Panda. You have some earnings. You have some prize money.
Like $200.
Me
I
too.
stole from Life Coach.
Nice.
Don't ask Panda what happened with the manga division.
Okay, I have no idea what that means.
No.
I'm sure it's an anime reference, though, as usual. So, Panda, you, of course, were at the We Play tournament that we were just attending as casters. You got to cast with Swim. Before we get into the actual tournament itself, how was the experience casting exclusively with Swim?
It was good. I think Swim is he suits me well in terms of his casting ability, especially for Underlords, where I think he had more experience with the game than me. So that helped me as well, kind of like perfect my casting over the days. And it was nice. I mean, it's definitely gone like an upwards trend from the first moment I worked with Swim to now.
Which apparently is complete shit.
You were doing so well.
I'm being very serious. He's definitely just a much better casting experience. You can tell Swim has improved a lot as well.
Come on, man.
That's a good thing. Come on.
Not to go off on a
Upward
tangent.
trajectory. Maybe like a downward spiral as well.
I need to hear what Swim was like back in the day, then, if he's like this now. Like,
Give it to me straight,
how could it
Panda.
be
What
worse?
do you mean? He was the best caster at the We Play event last week.
I'm talking about
in
Gwent,
my opinion.
like the first time you cast together.
Well, maybe he wasn't the best caster at those events. It's a very clear, white and black difference. For me, anyway. Maybe for viewers, not so much.
Okay, so before we get started with the We Play stuff, I do have to. You guys already know this, but for the viewers and the audio listeners, I may have to go AFK for the entire episode at some point, but remains to be seen. No big deal. I technically am here, so that's fine. Zeno, would you like to read off a couple reviews before we officially get started today?
I would absolutely love to. I figure if I take my time on this, we can just play out the clock. You'll be gone, and we can spend the rest
And
of the
can
time
somebody
without you. Should be
please
excellent.
donate a webcam from this century
No,
to Zeno?
please don't.
Please.
Please don't. I just bought one. Literally
Okay, gotta
while
go.
we were
Nice
starting.
seeing you guys.
Do you actually?
Wait, he's not serious. Okay,
No,
guys.
he actually is serious.
I'm Suns fan now, so Suns fan had to go. I'm
All
gonna
right.
hold this whole thing together, guys. I'm your new
Guys.
captain.
We have so much more knowledge right now as a host. This is incredible.
So
but we'll
my
get to the
question-
reviews.
We
yeah,
had
it's
like
gonna
all
fall
day
apart.
to plan this, and the exact moment that he has to leave, he decides to start recording. Like, I just don't understand the organizational point of view there.
No, Panda, this is a professional, high quality esports
Oh, dear God.
podcast.
All right, so we're gonna try and keep this train on the rails just a
Yeah.
little bit by going
You got
over
this, you know.
a couple reviews for our podcast on iTunes. And I have two that I want to go over. First of all, and I hope I don't mess this up because you have a number in your name. So I'm going to go with Satarian. Left us a very nice review. Says, excellent podcast. Hope it continues. Honest and to the point. Oh my God, this is so sincere, actually. I was thinking this would be like a sarcastic 5-star review, but no. This is why I thought it was sarcastic. Suns fan is knowledgeable, and the guests have been well chosen and interesting so far. If you like the game, this podcast is a good resource to keep up with the meta and the community. Hope they find a good sponsor. Thumbs up on that one. They're worth it. And he's posting this review from Tehran in Iran. So yay for international reviews. And the one other one, very excited about, and I'm not going to read this whole thing, even though I was planning on it, from Top Deck Terminus, just a couple days ago, actually.
Panda. We're thinking the same thing.
Oh, dear. I got nothing. As a student in the Underlords Academy, yay for that name, Rip. I've been studying up every week by listening to this podcast in an ever-changing environment. I appreciate the in-depth patch analysis and player insights. Both help me improve my plays every week. And here comes the good part. Definitely picked up some spicy builds. Some may say even more spicy than this Instant Pot recipe. and he gives us, guys, a full Instant Pot recipe for kimchi beef stew. It actually looks legit. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's probably going to take like 4 minutes. But if you guys go check out our reviews, you can see this whole thing. If you have an Instant Pot, looks good, and maybe leave us a spicy 5-star review too. While you're there, that's all I got.
All right. So obviously, a couple of us just came back from the casting of the tournament. There was a lot that happened. We had a nice, lovely time in Kiev. One of us is absconded and was no longer present here. But we can the two remaining of us can still kind of comment on how things were. So Panda, impressions about the tournament in general. How you like the patch and like how things played out.
I think it was better than I imagined in terms of like
Yeah.
Underlords as an esport. I think I thought it would be like less of a skill gap, let's say, but I think it was very clear that Snow, for example, was like very much ahead. So I'm happy to see that an esport that was kind of considered like a joke or like kind of more RNG heavy, kind of like card games, has proven to still have like a pretty big chance for skill to matter. So in terms of like gameplay, I was very surprised, and also like seeing all the new builds. Like, I had no idea 9 elusives would be a thing, or the build that Snow played at the end with assassins and mages and stuff. So I thought it was like all kind of figured out, but I was very wrong, and I was happy to be wrong, to be honest.
Yep. I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like when we showed up there, I was like, oh God, how am I going to cast this? Right. It's like 8 players. Like I was asking Sunsman for tips because he did like 1 or 2 auto chess events. I was like, how do you follow 8 players? Like how often should you be like moving the camera? I thought it might be just like kind of a big mess, but it actually ended up working quite smooth. Your thoughts since we no longer have Shannon with us.
Well, I have some great news, guys. I watched a lot of this tournament, and by that I mean I watched none of it because I was actually traveling the entire time. But I was actually really curious, like what you guys thought of, like one, like how much did the patch to like the the 1v1 setups from like a casting and spectating standpoint, like how much did that help while you guys were doing the tournament? And then sort of like within the tournament, did you guys feel like there was, like a meta that kind of evolved just within the players that were sort of playing kind of in these final games? Or was it sort of like, some people had come in with some cool preset ideas that they sort of pulled out for the tournament at the very end? Or was this kind of something that sort of developed throughout the play?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the patch really helped. I think it made the tournament a lot more interesting. The spectatorship value is being able to control things a lot better. It was super great for all of us. I think the meta did definitely evolve, as Panda is probably mention during the course of the tournament. Like there were a lot of people on nights at the start, and people kind of were aware that playing contested builds was a little too iffy, and like a lot of players basically just like started doing more sort of like conservative builds instead of just trying to jam all in on a single thing. And it ended up working out a lot better for them.
Yeah, I think at the beginning it was much more like players building the same build, but at the end of it, like everyone was on a different build pretty much for the most part. Maybe Knights had like 1 or 2 players, but overall it was much more variety than what I imagined. Just from the game itself, like Underlords itself, I think there's always going to be 2 or 3 like more optimal builds, and in a top 8, big prize money tournament, people want to go for the most optimal thing. But sometimes because it's contested, it's not as optimal, so it kind of balances itself. And I think it was very clear on the last few days of the tournament that was the case. And as for the 1v1 patch, I think for the viewers and the casters, it's obviously a lot better. But for the players, it was kind of the same. Like you don't change your playstyle really because you're not facing a clone or like a normal player. So I guess I was happy that didn't really affect the players much. But yeah, viewer-wise, it was a big improvement.
I have to say, like, I was like slightly skeptical at first, but I think the free reroll mechanic on loss is honestly genius. I think it is really, really healthy for the game. It changes a lot of things for the better. Like it makes it does put a bit more emphasis on like economy, which I think is fine, and it just makes like more decisions early, more, it's less likely to be just like low roll screwed. And it even increases diversity by forcing people to be on kind of different builds, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I kind of came into reading the patch notes and starting to play feeling like it would be a little bit broken. I think it's actually played up pretty well for the most part. I think like one kind of interesting thing is, they took away some of the early game damage, rounds 4 through 9. They've messed around a little bit with the lost streak gold. I'm kind of curious because like with the free rerolls, like you don't get punished for not streaking when you're losing. Yeah. So I'm kind of I wouldn't be. Maybe I should rephrase that. I would maybe like to see the damage come back because you don't have to play around guaranteeing a loss. You just have to like kind of walk that line if you're kind of wanting the free rerolls. So maybe punishing people a little bit harder early, but other than that, I don't know. Seems good.
Yeah. I think it's great. Now I think Suns fan unfortunately has absconded with our topics list. So Zeno, do you
yeah, listen, I make these up for him like right before we start.
Oh,
but,
so
like,
Zeno's
20 minutes before we go, he's like, yo, you got to hook me up with a little list of topics.
Oh, so we don't even need him. So we could just do this next week without him. You're saying
this is absolutely not. He is the raw sexual attraction, physically, visually on this show. Like, look at this right now. Like up in that top left corner, it's really missing something. Anyways, as far as topics, we kind of already went over Kiev and how that tournament went, but 2 is it's been a little while since we've had a chance to sit down and talk. Obviously, Sunspan's now not here, but there's been a pretty major shift two patches ago, and then we've seen kind of like minor tweaks to that patch very recently, as in yesterday. So kind of going over first your general thoughts. We don't need to get into breaking down line by line, but sort of the current state of the game, and then what they've changed, and then sort of how you like those changes, if you feel like the game's in a good place right now, maybe not so good, places you would like to see things tweaked, etc.
I think the game's in hands down the best position it's ever been in.
Oh, thank God.
I think it's not even close, actually. Yeah. I think like the diversity is at an all-time high. Comps are very balanced right now. People always ask me like, what's good? You can go most things right now as long as like you're a good player and you're scouting. Scouting is more important than ever. You want to be like on builds other people aren't on. And there's so much diversity and room for skill. Things are just balanced. Like even Terrorblade got hit with like a 50% nerf in this last update, the mini patch, and it helped a bit, but I don't think he's like outrageous. He's strong right now, but he's not super ludicrous.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Shannon and I have been talking about this a little bit off air and on air sometimes. I don't know that I've necessarily I loved a lot of the concepts that they've had in previous patches, but as for like the actual gameplay, whatever. It's been in a state that I haven't found particularly great. And this latest patch, like it's made Underlords, I don't know, for me at least, fun again. Like you can try out all this different stuff. You feel like when you come up with a build and you hit it, like it functions well. It might not be the best thing, but it'll get you into top 3, whereas before it felt kind of a little more RNG. I know I've never been a huge fan of a lot of the Global Alliance item stuff, so I'm more than happy to see them removed from the game, finally. I've been trying to figure out ways to like it, but I haven't, and happy to move on from that. I completely agree. The game feels really fun right now. So many things you can do. Like even like you guys mentioned the Knights Mages comp with like Viper and stuff. Like that's so cool. And I literally never would have thought of that ever. Like I love seeing stuff like that.
Panda.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think like you said, Swim, I think everything's viable. When I'm playing games now, I'm basically just like tabbing in like the first few rounds and then deciding what to go depending on what people are going. Like it's just 100. Like I don't have to like try and force something or force like 1 or 2 of the best comps because you can play pretty much everything. I think Savages are kind of bad late game though, so I don't know if I'm just not playing them right, but I haven't found success with them overall, so I'm just steering away from Savages in general. I think they're good in the mid game, but late game they lose too much power. So I think they have to maybe rework the Savage thing to something, maybe not how it was before, but some kind of mix. So it's not just an early game alliance. And also I think the Shaman tag is a bit odd, a bit weird. I think like Shadow Shaman and Enigma might have to be reworked as well, or Enigma moved to tier 4 at least, maybe. I'm not sure, but overall, I think it's very good. I think I like the also like the balance, the way they balance like hunters, for example, like adding a few percentages only, not just like changing it super drastically and then seeing what happens and then like fixing it again if they have to, depending on the play rate and win rate. So I like that form of balancing as well. And I think if they keep that up and if, like they said, a few like small updates, just tweaking things here and there, and then maybe like a big update adding content, for example, like every month or so, would be good to see, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this.
Oh.
Is he? Oh, is it?
Oh,
Is this
yes,
happening?
he's back.
Oh my god!
It's him. Just
Talk
in
to me,
time,
Shannon.
too.
I'm out of breath. I went up
Welcome
one
back.
flight of stairs and I'm out of breath. How's it going?
All right, you're back just in time to breathlessly give your opinion on the latest major patch and what they've changed so far, if you like it or not.
Well, have you guys talked about head-to-head or any of that or no?
Yes.
Not not so much. We didn't get in depth about it. We
Just the
commented
meta.
that we liked it.
So the head-to-head stuff, as you guys know, I've been asking for since the beginning of time, and they finally put it in. And I have to say, I'm literally out of breath, by the way. From a spectator standpoint, it takes it to the next level, right? Before, it was very awkward, especially in the last like 1v1, I want to say. Super awkward when both boards win. But now people take damage every round, essentially, unless you draw. And it makes it much more exciting towards the late game, especially. So that is, even though there's a lot of balance stuff we can talk about, I think that is the biggest change from the last month, or maybe even ever, to this game, honestly, in terms of making it more spectator friendly. I think it was really good. Oh, Jesus. Somebody speak so I can catch my breath.
I think the NA group was a good example of that because it was right after the patch, and to qualify to top 8, it was like Zawiaka versus Forhi, and whoever won like that last battle in the last game of the last like round of the group would make it, and it was like a 1v1 as well. So if that wasn't on the new patch, could have been like very awkward to cast and also like to see it play out. But in the end, it was like very easy. It was just whoever won, and Forhi ended up making it.
Yeah.
What do you think of formats in general for Underlords? Because that ends up being a little awkward, even with the head-to-head, like you were talking about. It can be exciting. I mean, there's a scenario where Snowf is just owning so hard, which he kind of was, that top place wasn't in contention by the final game. It's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know how you fix that.
It's also weird because you have to put up an incentive, like at the end, Snowf could have literally just sold all his units if there isn't like a rule already in place. And it was between Joseph and Forhi for like third, fourth, and that was $1,000 difference. So you have to be like, if you're organizing tournament, you have to be very careful about the ruling you have in place. And also for big turns, I think like some form of incentive for winning each game would be good, like monetary incentive, like maybe $50 or $100, just to make sure people aren't, losing on purpose or just not giving a shit about. Can I curse in this podcast? Or
Yes.
Yes.
Panda, Sunsfan, the host of this podcast, literally just left for like 15 minutes right after we started. You can do whatever you want on this podcast, Panda.
Please curse.
But yeah, the format.
Please.
The format's something to look at, I think. I think the way we played it was correct for a new esport. I think they found like a viable format at least. It was fair. It was 10 games, so there was very little RNG. It was very mitigated. And I don't know if there's some way you can make it optimize and just better for the viewing experience, because like you said, sometimes it was just like already decided. Like Rat in the NA group had like 20 points and he was like gone like 7 games in, like couldn't make it anywhere. So it is kind of awkward in that sense. I'm not sure how you could fix it, but it was at least, I think, very competitive. The integrity was definitely there.
Just make it like a Mario Party where the players that are losing just get like random points at the end.
Are you guys surprised at all
comeback mechanic.
by some people not being able to adapt as quick as others? Because the patch came one day, like after the first day of the event. So we got a small sample size of how strong players are. And we talked about the biggest example was BBG, who coming into the tournament was one of my favorites. But then the patch hits and he is just completely different versus other people that are actually, winning consistently. Does that surprise you guys at all?
No, I don't think so. I mean, some players people are very different playstyles, right? Like some players are just gonna feel the changes more than others.
Yeah, I think it's a skill set similar to like deck building in card games. You have to have that mentality to like resolve metas and understand changes and how they can like affect the current meta as well. And I think some players just have that skill more than just like being a meta slave and just being able to play the actual game, like reading off of like whatever guide, whatever. People can actually make their own decisions in that sense. So
Yeah.
I think some players were rewarded for that and others weren't so much. Also, like maybe the time zones affected. Like some players could play more before the next day and weren't sleeping. I don't know. It kind of depends, but it was kind of unfortunate though. Like last second pat. Well, in the middle of the tournament actually.
Yeah. Exactly. And the way Panda phrased it, it's not just like these players are meta slaves and they just read guides and they do well. It's not like they're bad players exactly, but some players are just better kind of like deck builder, theory crafter, solver, meta solvers, and some players are just like better at piloting and just min-maxing and being efficient with the strategies that are in their tight range, right?
Yeah.
How about the new items? What do you guys think? Let's start with Xeno in terms of... So the 4 new items: Helm of the Undying, which is kind of the old Unstoppable; Braces of Desperation, kind of like the old Final Flash; Poaching Knife, kind of like the, what was the Scrappy Inventor thing called? Or the Scrappy... Check the Bodies.
Check the
and
bodies.
Dawning of Ristul, kind of like Wicked Intent, except it affects you as well. Do you guys have a... Xena, what are your thoughts on the ranking? Let's rank these from 1 to 4 in terms of best to worst.
Oh, man. I think for me, the one that I find to be the most powerful is whatever the refresh on 30% health thing or whatever.
Bracers of Desperation.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like, generally speaking, and we touched on this while you were gone, like moving away from all these, like all the dumb global class specific type things and making things more flexible in general, I think is really good. I think like adding little like stat buffs to things is really good. So I like all the flexibility. That one feels to me like really strong. Like you throw that on level 3 Abaddon or something like that, or like whatever. There's a million different applications where getting a second spell off when a hero might be going down is really good.
Lone Druid, probably number 1, I want to say.
Yeah, I haven't been playing a lot of like Savage or Druids or anything, but that one feels good. After that, I'm not really sure actually.
Really?
Like,
I think it's a clear 1-2 or 2-1 even, depending on your perspective.
All right, so, well, go for it then. What's your top 2?
Well, I don't even know if Bracers is number 1, honestly. I think it's pretty close between that and Helm. I think Helm is more consistently good. I think those 2 are by far the best 2. And then Poaching Knife, I don't know. That's a weird one. Poaching Knife feels like maybe it's okay in certain hands. It's very dependent. And then Dawning of Ristul can screw you a lot of times, but in a lot of strategies, it can be really, really good. But I don't think you can ever put that higher than 3. So 3, 4 is interchangeable for me, personally. Everyone else?
I think Bracers is very clearly number 1. I think it's basically a refresher.
It's not even close.
Be changed. I mean, it's essentially a tier 4 item. Like it acts the same as
Wait, hold on.
refresher.
Everybody look at Xeno's picture.
Oh man.
Wait.
I hope that's my reaction to you saying that Bracers are not even the best one.
I think it is.
I don't know what the reaction is, but I don't want to know either.
Oh dear.
But I think
one day, guys. One day in this.
I think something has to be changed about Bracers because it feels like the same as Refresher and it's a tier less, so it's a bit odd.
Yeah.
I think Helm. Initially, I thought it was like okay, and I started playing. I thought it was really good, and now I think it's kind of okay again. I think it's very situational. And I think also with the Terrorblade was kind of the biggest user of the Helm because you could literally kill 4 or 5 units in those 4 seconds. But with Terrorblade nerfed, there are Bloodseeker early is still like the big abuser of the item, but for everyone else, I think it does what it has to do, and I think it's fine in tier 2. I thought initially about moving up, like having to move it to tier 3, but I think it's currently fine in tier 2. Like it can maybe keep like a Coddle alive for longer, something like that, but it's not anything you can abuse too much. I think Poaching Knife is, if you get it early, you can get more return from the gold, but if not, it's kind of whatever, kind of like Maelstrom, for example, like whatever kind of item. And then
Maelstrom.
And then
sorry.
Stay on topic. And then Ristul, I think, is also kind of fine. If you don't have healing, it's fine. But it also feels bad picking an item that only affects X amount of players and not all the players you're playing against. I've never liked kind of that binary sense of an item in card games or strategy games in general. So I'm not a huge fan of the design. but I think it finds its place against like warlocks and stuff like that.
Yeah. Nice thing about that one is at least it's like a tier 3, so you tend to pick it a little bit later in the game, maybe when, the top 4 players are a little bit more established and you kind of already know what you're going. But I do agree, like that's the one where you kind of feel a little bit more 50-50 on whether you'd even want to take it or not.
Yeah, so I recently have like redone my item tier list that I've been working on for a while. So I have like pre-prepared scores for this and everything. I gave bracers a 28. I gave 60, although that's like, I mean, the point system is like fairly arbitrary. I started the chainmail at 20 and up and downward. But yeah, bracers is a 28. Helm is right now, I like bumped it down to around 20. I could see it like stabilizing elsewhere. We have poaching knife at 13 and donning a wristle at 5. So yeah, that's basically what you guys are saying. I think Helm is for sure overrated. It's got an extremely flashy ability. Like when it gives you value, it gives you value in an extremely like big way. Like not big as in large impact, but big as in just like you see it and it's like very clippable and it's very sweet and it's cool. But on average, it's not like the craziest thing ever. It's quite solid.
Have you guys noticed when Helm is activated, the unit still being targeted by like certain spells, like Chaos Knight's Stun, for example, is the one that comes to my mind that I've seen today at least. I didn't really know that was a thing, but I don't know if they've tweaked something in the patches or if it's just like a weird, I don't know, bug type thing right now or what's happening with that. But
I have not seen that personally.
Yeah,
it may also be that the unit is like still alive, like a very, very, very small sliver of health. So
it has like like right now it's pretty easy to see because it has like a little icon above it.
True.
But yeah, I don't know. For whatever reason, like my games today, Chaos Knight was just consistently stunning already dead units when I thought they were pretty much untargetable by spells.
It fits the lore. He's a demon.
He's an idiot
guy.
Is that the lore?
He should count as double demons because his horse is a demon as well, I'm pretty sure. But that's another story. I wanted to quickly talk about... Sorry, what? What was that?
Never mind.
You're going to interrupt me to say nothing, Panda. Is that what you're doing?
I said I'm not sure that's how balance works. You can't just make 2 demon tags on a unit because it's a horse that looks like a demon.
Wouldn't that be a nerf to the... that would nerf the hero. The demons would cancel each other out.
That's true. That's a good point. I want to talk about an underrated item. Maybe it's not underrated anymore. I feel like Force Staff is legitimately good. It's like a poor man's sheep, as it should be, being it's a tier 2 versus... Is sheep tier 3 or 4?
4.
What do you guys think of Force Staff? I feel like in the tournament specifically, like placing it on a specific unit in the back line if you're going against... not that we see a lot of 6 assassin. We do see a lot of 3 assassin builds these days. Pushing them to the ends of the earth. Slark has to crawl his way back. See a lot of cool applications for Force Staff now versus before when it was actually counterintuitive a lot of the time.
This is actually something that I happen to agree with Sunsfan about. Wow. No. Well, we disagree about a lot of things, but I agree. I think Force Staff is underrepresented. I'd take it above something like Aegis.
Well, of course you hate Aegis with a passion. That's been established.
Garbage item.
I don't know. There's a lot of people that don't like Aegis.
Yeah, I agree too. Like Force Staff feels good. Backline against assassins is good. Like, although I feel like in practice this never plays out as well as I think it will. I think putting on like frontline late game when you're trying to have matchups where you want to avoid one unit on their frontline taking much of damage for getting spells off and that kind of stuff is good. Like it's a pretty long delay sometimes getting back into the fight after you Force Staff someone. So seems good.
I think it's situational. I mean, it's hard to see exactly how much value it's giving you, kind of like Aegis as well in that regard. But I mean, it's decent. It's not something I normally pick over like Arcane Booch, like the usual good tier 2s or like globals, etc. But I don't feel bad picking it either. I think it's fine.
So a tidbit with Force Staff is that it doesn't say this, but it pushes the opponent to the opposite corner, like in that direction specifically, which means if you're like corner boxed and you have Force Staff on a unit like that's kind of in your corner box, it'll send them really far away. It's a total disable of about like 3.5 seconds, which is really nuts. And the ability for it to specifically be used on melee units actually makes it, if anything, better than Scythe's ability to hit any unit. Because a lot of times Scythe will just randomly disarm a ranged unit that happens to attack it, whereas Force Staff will always hit something like a Slark or something like a Terrorblade or even a frontliner. Like if it hits a Tiny or a Pudge and it sends it to the back, that's something Scythe cannot do. Being able to send your opponent's frontliner to the back, it's actually not bad. Like I wouldn't take it over some good tier 2s, but it's really not bad.
Some other changes. Since I missed about 15 minutes of my own podcast, you guys have to tell me if you talked about it or not. Did you talk about ranked at all? The rank changes?
No, not yet.
No.
All right, Swim? I know you're very opinionated this, so I feel like you should go first on the changes to ranked and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan, and basically nobody I've talked to is. So when the patch came out, this would have been the patch on day 2 of the tournament. I like literally every change except for the change to the matchmaking system. Like I think basically all the balance changes were good, with like a couple maybe almost minor exceptions. But the matchmaking system change just feels weird. So for those of you guys who don't know, they changed the system so basically it's irrespective of the MMR of the lobby as a whole, and it's just like plus or minus based on the ranking that you end the game with. And the implication of this is basically like you're incentivized. It's kind of more grindy. You have to kind of play more to get a higher MMR, and there's no upper limit. Your MMR will just continue climbing as you play higher. And this has caused a vast majority of the top players to just stop playing. Like I've been talking to a lot of top players. Almost none of them are playing the game right now because they feel like there's no point.
It doesn't really make any sense, honestly. It's like, why wouldn't you reward someone for a better placement against people that are ranked higher than them? Like,
yep. There's no other game that does this.
Right. It doesn't. It's so weird that they had a better system in auto chess. Like you have the opportunity to do whatever you want. There's MMR for a reason. Like, why not? I don't know. And the other kind of weird thing is like, one, you're hoping to see. I mean, it doesn't like really matter as much like when you're higher levels, but like you're almost hoping to see bad players in your games, which is never fun because like you, at the end of the day, you want to be playing against like the best people, right? Like that's what makes Underlords exciting. That's what makes competitive play exciting. Sure. And then I think the other kind of weird thing is like if you're in like the top 1% or whatever, you're just going to keep growing your MMR basically on a linear line forever. Because it doesn't matter who you're playing against. Like you're just going to keep winning at the same rate, or getting top 3 at the same rate, and you're just going to keep going up and up. So
I can understand it from like the Lord perspective. From my perspective, since I haven't gotten to play a ton, and I'm still Big Boss 3 or whatever the God's name I still am at this point, I like it more because of a couple reasons. Number one, it is harder to up rank, but it's more consistent, right? If you're consistent in your play, you're going to get to what rating you need to be. It's a little more grindy, you're right. But at the same time, if I lose a couple games, I don't feel nearly as bad because I don't lose literally 2 ranks by losing twice. One thing I did notice, though, and maybe one of you guys can answer this for me. If I'm in a lobby with somebody specific, like let's say I'm playing with Joel, the MMR distribution is actually different for us. Does anybody know why that is? Because the way that I read this, it doesn't matter who you're playing with, right? But like I'm losing less MMR. So it does change in your party.
If you're in a party, there's different values. I think like first place is like 88, but then if the 3 people in the party place like 1, 2, and 3, I don't know, it changes a lot. It adapts to the party, so it's different levels. But yeah, I agree with what has been said. I mean, I think people were asking for visible MMR, and then Valve said, okay, here's your visible MMR, and then we're just going to change the system as well for no reason. Like it should have been whatever was happening behind the scenes, just visibly. That's all people wanted, really. And also, yeah, what Tino said, it's not just like the top 1%, it's the top like 0.000 like Bebe right now. He's a very good player, and you could even tell, you could say he's much better than Lord players even. Like he's very consistent. I think Snow, for example, is another good example. Those players are not going to get punished. Like the rankings doesn't like auto balance, so they can literally just grind, and by the end of like maybe 2-3 weeks, they'll be like 20,000 MMR ahead of like the 11th, 12th place person.
No, like 1 week.
Yeah, and then
I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's crazy.
People that look at the MMR system, they're gonna be like, "Oh, I'm gonna try and get top 1. Oh, wait, I have to play literally 200 games to even reach it, like winning with like a very good win rate." So it just messes up the system completely. Like, there's no point in playing if you're not grinding, like you're not streaming and grinding the game, and you have to also be as good as some outlier players like Bebe, like Snow, for example.
But I think after the season, I mean, this is season 0 still, right? So technically still in beta. And then after
Yeah.
season 0, they probably reset again to whatever
But
base point that you have.
it doesn't.
But
The
they should
reset
make like
doesn't
a
matter.
normal, like any other MMR ranking system in the world.
No.
I mean, I'm not saying it's like easy, but
No. Yeah, what I'm saying is once they do that, then they can redo the
of
MMR
course.
system in some respect to
I'd
fit
expect
what
them
people
to.
want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would not be a viable. You can't use a ladder for any kind of qualification because it would just be whoever grinds the most.
No, I mean, I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't change it in yesterday's patch. I will bet money that they'll change it in next week's patch.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for them to do it this way unless they have zero confidence in their actual matchmaking system. Because theoretically, if you're all evenly matched, then this should be the outcome anyways, right? Where you go up or down, it's all pretty even. It doesn't have to be weighted one way or the other because everyone's relatively close. But that, I don't know. It doesn't feel that way anymore, though. Like, it feels like, for the most part, you get pretty tightly clustered matchups. Maybe you guys have a different experience, but... like the swinginess that Suns fan you were talking about, they could have addressed in ways other than this system.
Well, I think overall, and I don't know if you guys have talked about re-rolling yet, but it feels the same way with re-rolling when you lose. Which again, I like when it first came out, I was I would say skeptical. That was the one thing I wasn't sure about. But I was also very public in saying that I'm just not sure. It's not like I dislike it, but now that I've seen it, I like it quite a bit because it just makes it feel better. So losing feels like you're not incentivized to lose as much as some may have thought originally, but it feels better to lose than it did before, versus with the ranking system as well, it feels better to lose because you're not losing as much. So I feel like maybe they're trying to cater to the masses versus the top 1%, right? For now, which I think is fine.
I think that mostly only applies in like kind of the big boss rating though, because I think for like most rankings you end up being like average MMR in your party and your win and loss will kind of even out. Whereas if you're in big boss, you're at that awkward part where you're mostly hitting opponents that are worse than you just because you're at the upper end of ladder, and then when you lose a lot. So, but I do agree with your overall what you're saying. Sure.
Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about from the big patch before we move on to the patch that came out? Was that today? Yesterday? Yesterday. Okay, I'll take that as a no. So, things that were changed in this, we'll call it a mini patch, considering how small it is versus this ginormous one that we were just discussing. One of the big ones, elusive, which everybody's been going, which Panda, you force it literally every single game. Now, when you get to that point of 9 elusive, instead of just 75% evasion to all units, it's just for the heroes, meaning for the most part, I think is there any other scenario where Furion is the only one that applies to? Is there a 10th unit that you would put that would have applied to before?
Nope. I mean, anything with summons, but you wouldn't really put a Lichen in as your 10th unit, I think. So.
Yeah. Until they add Necro Book, it's all the same.
Oh, yeah, that's the dream right there. Panda, as our resident elusive expert, what do you think of that small change?
Now, clarification, I played it one day, but it was the last day we were in Kiev, so I was spamming it after tournament.
So I don't want to interrupt you, but I need to debunk what you're saying because I was watching Joel's stream yesterday, and you were in the game.
It was very open, so I won elusives. I've been playing much more of like the mage assassin build than elusives, at least today.
Gotcha.
And some nights. I think it's obviously a nerf to elusives because Demon Hunters was like or Terrorblade was your end game 10th unit. So, and he got like a 50% pure damage nerf. So that's pretty massive. Like you were pretty much. I mean, it felt sometimes when you would take out Terrorblade, like when you're on 9 units and you take him out, have 9 elusives, you had like no damage all of a sudden. Like he was literally like your full damage kind of hero. So it was definitely a big nerf. I think it's still a very good comp though. If it's not contested, I think that's the big thing for it as well. It can definitely get you top 4 very easily and maybe win you some games. You could also maybe Slarg is more viable now as a 10th unit as well. So I like that combo a lot as well to see it. So that's cool. But
yeah,
the biggest nerfed comp was definitely elusive from the Terrorblade nerf.
Just to reiterate for people that didn't see the actual patch notes, like you said, Demon Hunters were changed. So when you have 2, essentially Terrorblade doesn't get the double bonus, right, as a demon. So he loses 50%. This is probably the strongest unit in the entire game. Is this an appropriate nerf? Is he still really good? Like, what's his power level right now, you guys think?
Still good, but I don't know. You guys have probably played a little bit more with it, but Terrorblade still, he kind of feels like the old like Shadow Fiend, where it's still like a really good unit that you can fit in a lot of places, does a lot of damage, but it doesn't feel like an order of magnitude too OP like it did before. So I don't know. It might need a little bit more of a tweak, but it still seems it's a step in the right direction at the very least.
Yeah, I agree with Zeno. I think that's. I don't want to say he was like overrated before, because he was good. He was very good. He was like still like probably the strongest thing in the game. But I did like I see a lot of people saying like it's the craziest thing ever in like every known situation. You should fit him into every single comp, and like that kind of statement is just it was a little over the top before. Like he was very good, sure. I think the 50% nerf is enough to make him like within a reasonable range. I do think so. I think he's still like a tier 1 strategy. You can splash him into a lot of stuff, but he's not like egregious and game shattering. He's just very good.
Yeah, I think he got the similar treatment to Shadow Fiend, like Zeno mentioned. I think Shadow Fiend was also before like used to splash him into pretty much anything. If you needed like DPS and like a Warlock, for example, the tags were very good as well. But he got nerfed, and now he still sees play, like in some Savage comps and like some comps that can fit him if you need a Warlock and some DPS. But he's not overplay, I think. So I think both got the same treatment. It sucks that Elusives got hit the most for that, because before like you used to be able to splash Terrorblade into different comps, but I would never think it was worth it for the most part. Like in Knights, like just go normal Knights. Don't play like why would you play Demon Hunters? I think it wasn't worth it. But yeah, Elusive's got the biggest nerf in that regard. I do think it's still good though, so it's fine.
Unlike Shadow Fiend, he's very item dependent. You kind of need a Blink Rimmon Shard to really take off.
Or a Helm of the Undying.
Yes.
It's not terrible on him. It's okay.
And then the final change for alliances in this specific patch, Hunters got a 5% extra proc, or higher proc, I should say, at each respective level. So that should be seeing more Hunters as a result, I assume. Although they weren't super weak. We're not seeing 6 Hunters, I feel like, but a lot of splashing of 3, depending on your lineup, obviously. Especially with Brawny. We saw Snowf do that a lot, right? The 3 Hunters, Brawny, so he's probably pretty happy with this change. Another change that I want to briefly talk about, because I feel like this is more quality of life, but of course it does help in certain situations, the Lichen change. So it reads, when Lichen transforms and he gains 30% max HP, he heals by the full 30% each time, rather than this being based on the current health at the same time of transforming. So this is only relevant if he's lower on HP, especially if he's really low on HP. Felt like it was really weird before how it worked, because if you were at super low HP and then you gain the percentage of your max HP, it's not really doesn't help you unless you have like a mech or something healing him at that exact time. But now you will technically heal for that max HP percentage, which is pretty nice for Lichen. I think it's a decent buff for him overall.
I think it's a great buff. I think it pushes him over the top a bit. Like there's a lot of situations where, especially with Lichen 3, your ult Lichen 3 like 5k HP. This can easily be 1,000 HP heal. This change. It's okay, not easily, but
it's dependent on being low, though, right?
Exactly. It's not going to be like 1,000 HP heal. That's an edge case, but if it's like 200 to 500, that's like a really, really big.
Do you think this is more quality of life just for understanding, or is it more because he's not a warrior anymore, so he's not nearly as tanky as before, getting the extra armor? This is a way for him, in theory, in a lot of situations, be a little bit tankier.
I think it's just for consistency, but it ends up him being buffed. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't played much Hunters after the patch or before it even. I thought they were a little bit weak, so I think now they might be just fine if they're not contested. But I think also with Brawny, I think Brawny is like the most high roll comp in the game. So I initially thought like, oh, it's gonna be like really fun to play, but if you don't get like the right pieces, like the Beastmaster 2 start early, it just feels super bad to play. Like if you fall into the trap of playing it and you don't find the right options early on, it just feels like you're getting punished really, really heavily, and it just doesn't end up anywhere. So maybe the Hunters buff will help the 4 Brawny 600 comp work out, but I haven't played it, so I can't really say too much more. I just do think that Brawny is like very high rolly. So if it works out, you're going to do really well if you get all the right pieces early, because it snowballs a lot. But if not, you're going to feel like super trapped into a comp that just gives you like a 6th or 7th place.
Okay, so the final thing that I want to discuss, it might seem small, but I want to make this kind of a a consistent thing. This is the micro buffing of Juggernaut over time, slowly but surely, from the worst unit in the game, not named Shadow Shaman, to a little bit better each individual patch. The last patch, I believe the thing that was changed was well, first of all, his stats were changed to be better in general for level 2 and level 3. Now he will spin if only there's 2 people in range. So because you lose DPS in theory if you're just spinning versus auto attacking, because in this game he doesn't auto attack. Although I did see a game where he bashed during spin. I don't know how that's possible. That's another story. So the thing that was changed this time, if Juggernaut is eligible to cast Blade Fury, meaning he has enough mana and it's not on cooldown, and he's about to take magic damage, he immediately casts Blade Fury and takes no magic damage. This is almost like a phase shift from Puck. So he's dodging a spell now. Might seem small, and it is. I understand, but we're talking about this is the Dark Seer treatment of many patches ago. Eventually, this hero will be really good. Thoughts?
So right now there's a bug that actually makes it a really big buff, which is that the auto spin that's not manual will go through a silence, which means you can equip Mask of Magnus on Juggernaut now, and he will spin.
Damn.
That's good. I've been doing that in games. If they fix the bug, there's a chance they might want to leave that in, I guess. But if they fix the bug, that will be a nerf to him. But right now, it's pretty good.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So correct me if I'm wrong. In auto chess, again, there's a lot of reasons why he's not as good as auto chess. One of the reasons being you can't stack items and whatnot. But correct me if I'm wrong, Blade Fury, the AoE increased in level, each respective level in auto chess, and it does not in Underlords. Am I correct in that?
I don't believe so, but I do know that the Blade Fury was a higher range. It was diamond shaped because auto chess didn't use like the cell range system. It just went by like a circle grid. So it was a diamond shaped pattern. It was hitting 4 more cells. If you imagine that. It was the 3x3 with 1, 2, 3, 4, like the points on each side. So it was hitting more units.
Okay. Do you guys think that Juggernaut will be amazing one day? If they fix it.
But today is not that day.
Remember when you guys were hating on Venomancer and then he became the best hero in the game for about a week?
Well, we were hating on it because at the time of us hating on it, it wasn't the best hero in the game.
Remember when Aegis was the worst item in the game and then became the best item in the game?
Absolutely.
I think I don't know. I wouldn't say it's the worst. I'd pick it over like Dawning of Ristal.
Great. All right. So do you guys have any other topics before we close this episode out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious if there's anything else you guys feel like, this latest patch, we got a couple of tweaks. Are there any other tweaks that you would like to see to kind of balance out the game? And second of all, for Swim specifically, since you have this fancy number ranking system, you've reevaluated all the items. Like, what's like an item or two that you feel is like significantly, well, either underrated or overrated?
Chainmail's underrated.
Still?
Yep, still underrating. Chainmail is
so basically you pick Chainmail always.
So I've been crunching some numbers and like talking with Frosty and 1 or 2 other guys, a friend of mine, and Chainmail might be better than like basically every tier 2 item in the game. Chainmail is better than Vanguard, which is hilarious but true. Like when you actually like do the numbers, Chainmail reduces more damage than Vanguard in almost every situation, which is very ridiculous. It's insane how good Chainmail is. A couple things are kind of overrated. We see stuff like Poaching Knife. I would say some of the globals. I think Smuggler and Embarrassment are a bit overrated. Aegis is overrated. And I think it's a little hard to evaluate some stuff like the mana items, I would say. And the best tier 5 is Desperate Measures, hands down.
Really? Mm-hmm. Mostly for the mana, I assume? The damage is pretty garbage, right?
I mean, it's good at all levels. The fact that it gives damage to specifically, it does depend on the situation for sure. There's certain comps, but the mana is always good. And depending on the situation, if you have like a good DPS unit, like a Terrorblade or a Luna or a Slark, whatever your top DPS unit is, the fact that it allows you to kind of cheat the 1 item cap, like giving your best couple of DPS units a 17% DPS increase that is unbridled by their item limit is very powerful as well.
And now that Savage doesn't give you any of that anymore. It's the only % damage you can gain, I want to say, in the game.
well, undead, but it depends on how you quantify that.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Panda?
Am I proposing a topic or am I talking about items?
Here, I'll go so you can think, Panda. I think the next
I thought
thing.
about it already.
Well, there's a lot of ways we can go with what Zeno brought up, but I'm going to go with an item that I hope they add. And I think we may have talked about this before. I want MKB really bad. I know that crits go through evasion, and maybe elusive's not going to be quite as strong as before, but I like the idea of having an item that gives, like, first of all, Battle Fury feels weird. You should be able to put this on ranged heroes now. Like, you don't. The cleave feels so unimportant. The 70 damage is nice, but MKB giving damage and True Strike seems like it's just for one unit, so it can't be like that strong, right? I feel like that's a really cool item that they can easily add to the game, which they probably will at some point, but I'm not sure if they're ready.
So I want to talk about just the esports scene in general. After the WePlay tournament, what do you guys think is going to happen the next few months? And what do you guys think has to happen for this not to be like an Artifact version 2? We're following the same steps. I mean, it's been maybe not as bad as Artifact in terms of decline, but there has been, I think, some player loss after the initial 200,000 concurrence from the first week or two of the game. And we play event not getting that much viewership compared to say TFT, for example. So what do you guys think has to change? And do you guys, I think Valve has to at TI or at some point really start pushing it.
Not TI.
I know it's not going to happen.
No.
Okay, maybe not TI because there could be a backlash kind of thing like Artifact.
Yeah.
But they have to start supporting and pushing the esports side of it more, I think. Yeah. The same way that Riot allowed Twitch to have a Twitch Rivals event and licensed it and I guess was involved to some degree. I think Valve has to be more involved.
No, I think the Twitch Rivals stuff, Valve has, there's no, it's not like they're preventing anybody from doing that. I think that just the viewership is not worth it for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, probably.
But in terms of TFT paying streamers to play the game, that will never happen with Valve. I 100% guarantee you. Unless they completely change strategy, that's never going to happen. But I agree that announcing a tournament or something, I mean, the Auto Chess has a tournament now, $1 million, right? That would be nice. Just take that Artifact tournament, turn it into Underlords. But I think the changes to the head-to-head, I think, makes such a giant difference with spectating. I think it's going to get better over time as a result of that, among other changes. But it's going to be a slow grind. It's not like it's going to be an overnight thing for sure.
Yeah. I think that Valve is basically just biding their time right now. They want the game to be in a better spot. They want to maybe get out of beta. And then maybe they'll push marketing moves, for example, that kind of thing that mentioning it at TI would be. I don't think they'll probably do that kind of thing, but those kinds of things to try to boost player ship when maybe around the time of the first big expansion update, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just wrapping up. I don't think it's going to be a second Artifact. There's a bit of decline, but unless Valve literally gives up on it, I mean, there's bounce back potential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think the one kind of weird thing is Valve, maybe over the last decade or so, until recently, has kind of had this very libertarian view of releasing games where they have this mindset of if we build something that we think is good, then people will find their own value in that and they will come and play and it will be chosen over other games. And I just don't know that we're in that space anymore with how games are marketed, with how people value viewership on streams, with how streaming can kind of drive demand for games. But I do agree that I think when the time is right, it would be nice to see, they don't have to do $1 million tournament, right? They can they can generate interest and generate viewership in different ways that aren't that capital intensive. And I hope that they will take a little bit more of a hands-on approach with that. Even what they do with either Dota or even CS:GO, they have some interesting ways of generating revenue around that game. I don't know, just be a little bit more proactive. But then as far as changes maybe I'd like to see in the game in general, I really do think the game's in a really good place right now compared to where it was, for maybe the last month and a half before the big patch. I think one kind of interesting thing, and this is just speaking for myself, I very, very rarely play with any tier 5 units at all, other than maybe Medusa or throwing a level 1 Troll Warlord or something into the game. But like for the most part, they basically dropped completely out of the game, which I don't hate compared to where the meta was, a month and a half ago or whatever. But I think finding a little bit of balance in that, and I have no good ideas on how exactly to do that. But like right now, they don't seem like they're a part of the game.
Well, I think something they could do, just one random unit to talk about, is Enigma. You could actually just put the old Enigma back in. Like, level 1 Enigma is complete garbage right now. And yeah, part of it is being Warlock, but the fact that his AoE was reduced so drastically in that one patch, which was in response to the legendary meta of that 2-week patch, I want to say, you could just make these legendaries way better. I mean, Troll I think is fine right now, but like Enigma can definitely get a buff.
Yeah.
I think Troll with only 4 is a problem, though, because you can't complete it without Warlord, and it's a tier 5. I think like Primordial in that sense has it kind of figured out, where there's 4 units and Enigma's like the 5th one. I mean, Enigma's kind of bad, so you don't include him anyway, but there's the option to. And I think Hunters as well, to some extent, with Medusa. You don't have to include Medusa to get 6 Hunters, but you can if you find it. There's like this reward for finding it, but it's not like an obligation. But for Troll Warlord, you need him to complete 4 Trolls, so it makes it impossible.
Bring Dazzle back.
I think that has to be fixed.
I agree with Panda. I think he really hit the nail on the head. Like, the best possible way to have tier 5s is as part of alliances that are optional upgrades but aren't necessary for the completing of specific alliance tiers. You need to have them synergy based, otherwise they're going to be too strong or too weak. And you need that synergy base to not be necessary for the build. Otherwise it's going to be a high roll whether you get it or not. So it needs to be a synergy specific optional upgrade to a build. That's the only way to do it.
Unless you establish a synergy and then upgrade that synergy late game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I do like want to specifically call it Enigma, Sunsfan, that you mentioned. Like right now, where the meta's at, 1 with all the tier 3s, which have higher HP, 2 with things like night comps were in like the old auto chest. Like Enigma was a great counter to that sort of build. Enigma feels like a piece that could be in play a lot right now, but isn't because it's kind of garbage. So finding a way to specifically with Enigma, either like change it back to what it was before or lower it to 4 cost and switch something around. I have no idea, but Enigma feels like a piece that should be getting a lot of play right now if it was just a little bit better.
Yep, agreed. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of this amazing episode where I missed, I want to say 33% of it in its entirety, so I'll have to watch and make sure you guys didn't talk too much shit about me. Thank you to Panda for joining us. You can follow him at ImpetuousPanda. Hopefully I spelled that correctly, Panda. Really appreciate your time. I know it's very difficult to find a time zone that works for you, but luckily I did wake up earlier just for you, in fact. Swim and Zeno, as always, thank you. Again, remember, guys, you can find this VOD on Dota Cinema later or on all audio channels for whatever podcast app you use. We will try to do this every Friday. Worst case scenario, it'll be every other Friday, but Friday is the day that we've established until we change it, which could be very soon. Next time, you can also look forward for those visual people out there for Zeno actually getting a webcam that's not
I'll get more than like 1 frame every 5 minutes. And yeah, thanks again, Panda, for joining us. We appreciate it.
That was a pleasure.
Until next time, guys, have a great one. Enjoy Underlords. Goodbye.